argument is pretty much that it is compulsory. And optional, as we know, it is completely up to the user to use it or not. Now, let's add a couple of arguments and let's create them. So we're going to create two arguments. We're going to create parser.add argument. First argument, we're going to call it name. And let's take parser dot. We'll add another argument. So add argument. Let's call it, okay, let's make sure it greets in two ways. One in a nice way, another in a sarcastic way. Let's make it two things. So we'll add another argument called double hyphen sarcastic. Right. Now, here's what we need to do. When you run this program, you can enter these arguments specifically. Like when you run this program, let's say Python argparse.py, you can specify name equals, let's say John, and double hyphen sarcastic equals, let's say yes or no or whatever it could be. That's basically it. So this is what we're going to try. Let's see how exactly this will work and what exactly this performs. First things first. Now that we have a parser object and we have added these arguments in parser, we need to retrieve them and use the values in them. So let's do that. So the first thing I'll do here is parser dot parse arguments. Again, I know there are a lot of functions that we're doing in a very short time. I completely understand that when we look at this, we are creating an object of argument parser, we are adding arguments, and after adding arguments, when the program is running, we parse or retrieve the arguments when the program is running. That's basically what we need to do. So let's try this out. Now, first things in our case, here's the simple task. We're just going to print arguments.name. Remember, one of the, we need to parse these arguments and store them somewhere. So let's store them as args. And within these arguments, args, let's read the name and let's also print args dot whether it is sarcastic or not. Let's do that later. Yeah, let's do that as well. Done. Now let's see and run this program first. Again, a very simple logic that we have done. Just to recap, I know these are a lot of functions the moment we start them. I completely understand that. But that's how this particular module is, unfortunately. There are other things which are much more complicated, but I'm going to make it so much easier for you with some wrapper functions. This, unfortunately, we need to do the following. So yeah, back to this. We are adding a couple of arguments. We are reading what arguments user has entered, and we are printing them. If I run Python space 10, whatever this file is, it gives me the following error. It says the following arguments are required name. And it says you should do this to avoid an error, because remember, name is a positional argument. It's compulsory. It's not optional, which means I have to enter it. To make it optional, just use double hyphen and run it. That means they're optional. If you don't enter anything, they will be none. If you enter them, you'll receive them. That's the whole idea. That is how it works. Now, if it's not with double hyphen, it is compulsory. Compulsory or positional arguments don't begin with double hyphen, just for our reference. Now let's go ahead. When a person runs this program, Python, let's say 10, and I'll use double hyphen h. Double hyphen h means help. Always remember, this is a default thing that we have. And this is a default thing of argparse within Python. Whenever you use double hyphen h, it by default goes to help option. But we have provided nothing to help the user understand. We have just provided user add name, add sarcastic. But we haven't provided user info like what does name mean or what does sarcastic mean. We haven't provided any such description. So we can add such description as well. So let's add such description. To do that, for any argument that you're adding, you have an additional parameter called help. Here you can specify, enter your name to be greeted. And we'll specify within sarcastic, help equals, specify this if you want a sarcastic greeting. That's how we'll have it. Now, if you run help again, double hyphen h, you'll see it says there's an optional parameter called name, and the help message that you'll get with it is enter your name to be greeted. There's an optional parameter called sarcastic, and it says specify this if you want a sarcastic message. And yeah, that is the basic logic of arguments. We're going to use it. We haven't used it yet. We have only learned how to add arguments to our program so far. We haven't yet used it just for our reference and our understanding. We have only added it. So yeah, till here, if you have any queries or any questions so far, please feel free to ask. Because I know argument passing is something new, but it should not be complicated. It's just that there are too many new functions that we see all of a sudden. That's the whole process of it. So yeah, back to this. If there are any questions so far, please feel free to let me know. I'll just wait for a few seconds and then we'll move on to the next part of it. All right, so no queries. That's pretty awesome. That's awesome. In that case, let's go on to the next part of this. Now, just to remember, double hyphen h as a flag gives you the description to be printed on screen. Right. Now, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to run this with double hyphen name. Now, remember the same example which we saw earlier, one of the repositories that we saw with the YouTube one. Yeah, there we go. You can provide first video ID, second video ID, and so on. And you can provide optional parameters like languages and any other parameters as well if required. So we're going to do the same. I'm going to write double hyphen name space, let's say Jack, and double hyphen sarcastic space 2. If you run this, here's what happens. Whatever you write ahead of double hyphen name, that will be received here as a name argument. Whatever you write ahead of double hyphen sarcastic, that will be received here as sarcastic. This is how it works. So the output for this is going to be like this. It's going to be for our reference, output to print name and sarcastic. Now, that is not what we need to do. Now, I'm going to comment this as well. We don't need to just do that. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to specify in sarcastic, mention true if sarcastic message, else ignore. This is what we'll specify here. Now, once you run help here, you'll get to see for name, it says enter your name to be greeted. For sarcastic, it says mention true if sarcastic message, and otherwise just ignore it. Now, Let's create appropriate messages. If in our case arguments dot sarcastic is equal to or is true, then we're going to give a sarcastic message, right? Then we're going to give um, a very sarcastic message, like let's say um, didn't expect you to run this program, but anyway. Otherwise, we'll just write. Oh, yeah, we have to print the username as well, right? So we haven't printed the username. So let's add that as well. Remember, the username is going to be args dot we have the flag name, which is name. That is what I'm going to use. So hey, followed by name, and then didn't expect um, you to run this program, but hi anyway. Otherwise, we're just going to print something like hi followed by args.user, and then we'll just print welcome to this program. That's pretty much it. So let's run this. If I just print double hyphen names followed by Jack, okay, let's see where it went wrong. Oh, I am so sorry. It's not user, it's name. Yeah, let's replace that. There you go. If I just specify the name, it says hi followed by the name Jack, welcome to this program. If I specify name Jack and sarcastic space true, it's gonna give me, okay, let's see. Um, okay, let's see where we went wrong. Let's print args.sarcastic. It is true. Though it is true, it's somehow going to else. That's funny. I need to probably figure out why this is a scenario. Let's take a look at this. Oh yeah, one thing I totally forgot. Yes, an important thing I forgot about it. There we go. Type of args.sarcastic. Every single arg parse, every single argument that you pass from here will be read as string by default. This is one thing I forgot to inform. Every single element, whether it is parsed as, whether it is sent as true, whether it's a number, float, doesn't matter. Every argument you pass will always be string by default, which is why we're not going to check is true. We're going to check if it is equal to true as a string. Now, if you look at this and if you execute this, it's going to print, hey, Jack, didn't expect you to run this program, but hi anyway. So yeah, this is the whole idea of arg parse and argument parsing. And yeah, we use this for a lot of operations. For example, you might create a program in the future which, let's say, performs the following operation. Your program receives some input file name, and input file name as in double hyphen file name. After receiving that input file name, your program has to go through that file, um, read all the content, convert it from a PDF to docx file, or save it in a different format, or any such thing. So there are a lot of such things you might want to do. And instead of having user enter an input, you can just receive an argument like this. In this case, these programs can be executed by other programs because you can pass these arguments as commands and you don't have to manually run them. You can automate these a lot. This is about argument passing. So yeah, I hope this helps and I hope this makes sense. I'm just gonna copy this output content as well. And examples are these for reference. Yeah. So please take a few seconds, just walk through it if you want. If you have any queries within this, please feel free to ask. After this, we're gonna start with um, a couple of hugely important concepts when it comes down to uh, Python and working with large scale and real life applications ahead in time. Right. So yeah, if there are any queries, please let me know. Just wait for a few seconds and we'll move ahead. All right, perfect. So yeah, no queries in that case. Let's move ahead and work around the next part. Where were we? Yeah, here. Right. So let's go to the next part of this and yeah, begin without any delay. We've got a lot to work on and a lot to learn. Now, here's the thing. To start with the next part, I want to go back to a little bit of basics and work through some things. Now, when we have large scale applications, I'll just give you one small example of a large scale application. Let's say Instagram, for instance. Now, this is a very large scale application and they have to um, log a lot of information. There can be 200,000 users active every minute, and they need to keep a track of them. They need to keep a track of everything so that if some error occurs, they need to figure out where that error occurred, which line of code that error occurred, and how do we solve them? Because you will have backend code, right? Backend code to go to database, get the video content, or go to database, get username, password, and or perform operations like what kind of reels he might like, or what kind of content, or what are his friend circle, who do I suggest him or her. So many things can be performed within this, and all of these will require backend logic. Assuming that it's developed in Python, let's assume that for now, all these lines of code should be logged in such a way that if something goes wrong, or for informational messages as well, if something goes right as well, these messages are logged in a separate file. And this separate file within which these messages are logged in is stored, and you can go through these and check these at any point of time. That's one thing. Now, I'll just point this out from a perspective of best practices, from a startup company to a mid-level company to a large level company, for example. In a startup, let's say, for instance, your application has only 5 to 10 users. You don't have to worry about logging much. Any user who encounters a problem, they'll let you know. You can replicate that. You will get to see the logs directly in the terminal. Logs as in these messages directly in the terminal, and you'll get to know where is the error and you can resolve them. However, let's say the number of users go from 50 to 100 or 500 to 1000. At this point of time, it's going to become much more difficult. Yeah, let's take 50 to 100 to begin with. At this point of time, it's going to become much more difficult for you to just ask a user to redo it and replicate it. Instead, every important task you're doing in your code, if you're connecting to a database, you're going to add a log message saying, I'm connecting to a database. If you're disconnecting from a database, if you're getting some information from user, if you're returning some information back to user, you're going to log all this information. If some exception occurs, you will log that as well. So we're basically going to log all these information so that we can access them, we can use them, and any error that occurs, all these log will be stored in a single log file. The whole idea is to go through that file and check where error occurred, because in log you can modify things like if error occurs, mark it in red color. If it's a regular information message, mark it in blue color, and so on. All these things you can do. So you can scroll up, see where the error occurred, what time it occurred, what line of code it occurred, which file it occurred in, and what was the error that occurred. Observe everything from here, go back to your code and resolve it. That's the purpose of logging. And we use such single files and store logs and we read them. However, let's go a scale further. What if the number of users of 5,000 to 10,000? Your logs will be generated at a pace where your log will have probably 1,000 lines generated every 10 seconds or so. In that case, it's very difficult to keep scrolling and finding errors. You need a separate application to search for errors within this. That's what we need to do. And here's how we do that for large scale applications. To do that in large scale applications, you use applications like AWS, Amazon's Elasticsearch. Elasticsearch is a very fast searching application, hence it's called Elasticsearch. You can install this locally or you can use it on cloud. There are a lot of ways to do this. But yeah, Elasticsearch is basically a search-based application which performs logging. You will log information to this Elasticsearch database, or let's not say database, Elasticsearch module. And whatever logs are stored here, you can walk through those logs in a easy user interface based way. Like all these are logs. You can search where the errors were in the logs. You can search for specific patterns in the logs. All these things can be done with live troubleshooting. This is what organizations at a very large scale use when they want to perform logging, just for our understanding and our example. So I just gave you an entire tour of how logging works from, let's say, basic level to a very advanced level. But for our purpose, since we are working only on top of Python, we are going to log in a single file. We're just going to call it as info.log, and we're going to log here. The logging we'll do is what was the date this was logged in, what was the time this was logged in, and which file was executed for this log, which line number of code generated this log, what is that log, all of these, and what is the severity of this log. All of these we're going to specify, and that's what we're going to do. So to start with this, here are the severities of logs. You have debug, info. These are the basic log severities, that is debug and info. These are like the basic um, log levels, the basic log levels which are utilized to perform logging of just small and minor information which are not critical. Followed by this, what if there's a warning? Then you put it in warning level. If it's an error, you'll put it in error level. And if it is critical, you'll put it in critical level. So these are the 5 levels of logging that we have generally. So whenever you want to perform logging, you have to specify which logging are you storing, so that when you look at this later on, if you want to search only error logs, you can search only this. If you want to search only warning logs, you can search this. If you want to search only critical logs, you can search via this. This helps segregate and categorize them. And this is something we're going to use in our case. Now, first thing, I'm not going to go through the inbuilt logger of Python. If you look at Python logger is quite complicated, unfortunately. It's very unnecessary and complicated, to be honest. If you look at the basic tutorial, you get to see how um, you can start logging. But if you want to store it in a file, if you want to store all this log information in a file, there are a lot of things that you need to do which becomes complicated. Like a lot of basic things like what do you want to add as the time, what do you want to add as the level, how do you want to store the message. All these things you have to set by yourself in many ways. There's a lot of logging configuration that you have to set by yourself. This becomes complicated over time. So to avoid this, to avoid all these additional overhead, which is not useful, because one thing I'll just be honest with all of you as participants here, I always prefer, whenever I'm coding, I always prefer to spend my entire time in productive coding, in coding that I matter. If I'm coding all the basic stuff which some other module can do for me, I'm not spending my time effective and efficiently, right? So I'm not doing that. Whenever I'm coding, I want all the basic things to be done by itself so that I can focus on the more important part to make sure that the code never breaks, to make sure that the code works as expected, to make sure that it keeps running, to make sure that no user gets affected. I want to focus on those things, not the very basic things which any other module can do if I just import it. That's why I, as a Python developer, do not use the default logger of Python. Instead, I use this particular package available called logger. As its, let's say, motto particularly states, Python logging made stupidly simple, because Python logging by default is quite complicated. This makes it easy. For our basic understanding, this is all that we need. So this is good enough for us. And this is what we're going to use. Right. So we're going to perform logging through Loggeroo up next, and we're going to see how we can log information about our, or how we can log data, and make sure that we can log whatever we have um, in our case, and make sure that we can see those logs later on and look at them, verify them, so that we can see wherever user errors are happening or wherever code errors are happening and resolve them. So that's why we're going to use logging, and we'll do that up next. But prior to that, I think we have reached the mark where you'd have to go for your lunch break as well. So yeah, let's do one thing. Let's join back by 1 p.m. Eastern time and continue. Until then, please have a nice break and have your lunch, and we'll join back. I hope that's fine with everyone. And before I continue ahead, just one query before we depart for lunch. I hope the pacing of today's session was all right for you all, and the way of delivery and everything was fine. You can just respond with a thumbs up, or if you can, if it wasn't fine, you can just let me know, because we are going to more and more concepts now. So I just want to know if we're all in the same boat when we talk about this. That's all. So any response towards this helps me to know whether I'm going at the right pace for us or not. That's pretty much it. All right, so let's join back by 1 p.m. Eastern time. Thanks a lot for the response as usual. We'll catch up ahead. Thank you all.